If you're familiar with mysteries, you know that there's red herrings. So you know that there's going to be paths that you're walking down that are misdirects. But also at the same time, anybody could be possible. Really, anybody is a suspect.
Well, in a good mystery, and I feel like this is, mystery fans will be mad if you didn't play fair. They want you to play fair. So what they want is they want the evidence to be there. They just want it to be amongst a bunch of other evidence to where it's hard to actually discern it. And that way they can kind of play the game like we just did. Like, I think mystery readers want to kind of play along and they want to try and guess. Welcome, friends, to episode 272 of the Ink to Film podcast, where we read the book and then see the movie. I'm writer Luke Elliott.
And I'm filmmaker James Bailey.
And this week we're talking about the first half of Liane Moriarty's 2014 novel, Big Little Lies. So, James, this is a show you've seen, so you know all the spoilers, whereas this is something I have not seen, I have not read. So I'm still wondering about a lot of these mysteries. We're halfway through. So James knows some stuff. I don't. He's not going to spoil it. We'll go up to the first half. And hopefully it's fun to hear me speculate, I should say, since, James won't be doing that. And then, the way our coverage is going to progress is next week we'll tackle the first half of the show. And then that way I still will have some mysteries going into the back half of the show. And then our final episode we'll do on this, we'll cover the rest of the show and the rest of the book simultaneously.
I have seen the show but haven't read the book. So it's cool to see the source material here and kind of get a much more Australian version of the story than I necessarily remember from the show.
I was wondering if it was set in Australia.
It may be. I honestly don't remember that fact. Yeah.
Or if this was like, an American production. Yeah, I don't know. I'll be curious to see that. Reese Witherspoon and who else?
Nicole Kidman, Laura Dern, Shailene Woodley. Yeah,
I think they're all Americans. Am I wrong? No? Nicole Kidman might not be.
Nicole Kidman is Australian, yeah.
She's Australian? Okay.
Yeah. We also have Zoë Kravitz in the role of Bonnie. So just a star-studded cast all around.
All right, well, don't tell me who each of those three play, because I want to try and guess at some point here. Maybe we'll save that for a little bit, because I think we're too early on to get into that just yet.
But I like tackling a story like this because it is a perspective that I don't often think of, and it's not one that I share, but it's one that when you get into a story like this, you empathize so much with it, and you feel all the tension, and you feel all the anxieties and all the frustrations and all the other things that go into a story like this. It's very real in that way.
Totally.
So I just have always loved storytelling for that fact, is that I get to live some small version of a woman with children in the school systems and drama.
Yeah, little kid going into kindergarten for the first time, which is what it is in the book at least. And yeah, it's cool. It's like a peek into that life, right? Like you get to live in their shoes for a little bit and imagine what it would be like to be there. The husbands are around and they do some stuff, but it definitely is more centered on the women, right? Clearly. And that aligns with what I was reading about this book in the sense that it is considered chick lit, which is, I don't know if that's the official term, but I was seeing that term tossed around a lot, which is interesting because I like on one hand, it's a marketing term, right? And I think there's a lot of women who are wanting to read chick lit, right? And so they look for that. They're looking for books that are marketed in that way. But it's also kind of limiting in a way, right? Like you're like, I'm enjoying this book, so why is it not being marketed to me? I don't know. It's I think it's funny. It has this like lightness to it, zany character, especially with like Madeline. She's just funny over and over again. There's just a lot of like light stuff that I'm really getting into, and then I was surprised at how Liane Moriarty is able to like blend in some true darkness into the story that I kind of didn't expect, and I was like, whoa, this is getting almost like Gillian Flynn, like Stephen King, like dark. And then, of course, like I look on the cover and we have a quote from Stephen King that says, "A hell of a good book, funny and scary." So I agree with Stephen King. It's got this equal measures funny and scary, and it's not like terrifying or anything. But when I say scary, I mean it's got like darkness. It's got some of the like more upsetting parts of life and upsetting things that can happen in books. Like we're getting into it. We have like a rape sequence that is talked about. We have, just a lot of like dark shit that gets discussed. Abuse is definitely like at the heart of this. It's about a murder. And at first I thought, oh, okay, this is going to have more in common with like a cozy, like an Agatha Christie style murder, like a murder mystery at a kindergarten. How fun. I thought we were going to get into that Agatha Christie territory of like whodunit kind of thing. And it was going to be kind of light. But then I quickly realized, no, it's very serious at the same time that it's dealing with this murder. And it's actually quite dark.
I think the way that she expertly navigates this is by having some of these interviews interspersed through the chapters and the ways that they're kind of poking fun at how ridiculous their lives can be at times.
Yes, but also it's like introducing a bunch of side characters, and you don't realize it, but because like over time you start to get them introduced in the main narrative, and then you kind of are connecting it, and they're speaking from the future, so you're also getting little breadcrumbs.
There's the drama too. They're giving you tidbits about like clues, but it's also a bit wrapped up in like drama. Like they wouldn't let my child do that, and the teacher's secretly doing this, and that person behind closed doors does that, and a lot of that like gossip.
Oh man, yeah. And then you got people with clear agendas, and you got like the one guy in there who's like PC culture these days, and like it almost felt like a message board, but then I guess it's supposed to be interviews. At first, I thought we were getting like a Discord or like a
next door kind of thing.
Next door, yeah, like a little group chat. But then I realized that it must be an interview because we have the officer like telling people, and then a couple times they refer to like each other as if they can see each other. So I'm like, all right, I think this might be actually an in-person interview that they're doing.
And that, like you said, that threads in some fun humor. I like the way that the book sets out to say like, look at all these like for the most part well-off people who are look how frivolous their lives can be. And as time goes on, you start to understand that you don't know what goes on behind closed doors in people's lives, and how those little frivolous things have there's reasons why people are reacting certain ways. And
at least our three main leads are all also pretty self-aware, and I like that element in all of them. Madeline knows that her life is kind of silly in some ways, but then like I think the way that Bonnie is the like foil for her makes it really interesting because she feels so like plain and like cliche to her or something, like lowbrow.
Bonnie's Madeline's like husband's new wife
who's like new age and like perfect and younger and like all this stuff, and she's like rubbing off on Abigail, which is their daughter. And I just love that element is really interesting to me within her. And like honestly, all three of our leads have like really interesting backstories. They all have little mysteries, and that was the thing that I was recognizing that I think worked really well here and works really well in a lot of mystery novels that we've covered on the show. And it's not a genre that I've read a ton of, but man, I enjoy reading them. And I'm like realizing that when it's done right, and this is the kind of mystery I like where like there is that edge of darkness. Because like as much as I can enjoy an Agatha Christie, like it always feels a little toothless to me.
It's a romp.
And whereas this feels more real. But what I like is that there's all these little mysteries along the way. It's not all about one mystery. It's like, and Agatha Christie, of course, does this well. This is not exclusive to this kind of writing. Every character has a mystery. There's the Ziggy mystery of like what's going on with Ziggy and this other child. There's all these little mysteries unfolding, even as we know there's this outstanding larger mystery of somebody gets murdered. We don't even know who it is, which is an interesting choice. Mm-hmm. Somebody gets murdered. We don't know who it is, and we don't know who did it. So there's two mysteries there that we'll have to get filled in as we go. So there's a lot that like makes this really, like I saw like somebody called this compulsively readable, and I totally agree. Like once I started getting really into it, I was like, man, I just want to keep reading this book. And in fact, when we got to the halfway point, I was kind of bummed. I was like, oh man, I want to keep going. I'm really curious about what's happening now. So yeah, I'm having a good time with this one.
Me too. It's good to revisit because even though I've seen the show, I watched it when it originally aired, so it's been many years now. Honestly, it was coming out around the time that we first started the podcast, I believe, like 2017, 2018. One of my favorite shows when it was on the air, and so getting to revisit...
I remember everybody talking about it. I kept saying, I'm not going to watch it because we might cover it. And so I'm glad we finally did, because it ended up just being kind of one I missed, and then I was like, I didn't know if we actually were going to end up covering it. So this... Oh, by the way, this is a perfect opportunity to say this was a community-voted project for our second community quarterly poll of the year, and we decided to open it up to TV, and this was what was selected. And I just got to say, like, great selection. Thank you all and everybody who participated, our patrons for voting. Yeah, this is really cool, and this is the kind of stuff we get from these community projects. It's like stuff that we wouldn't necessarily have chosen. Our last one we did was Twilight, right? And that was a really fun project too. That's not something I would have chosen on my own, but I had a great time with. So yeah, if you wanted to participate in that, check out our Patreon.
It's a great way of forcing us into a project.
Yeah.
In a good way, you know, because ultimately, like, those are things that were on our radars, both Twilight and Big Little Lies. And I would hope that we were going to get to Big Little Lies at some point. Twilight may be more of a dark horse, but we've done both of them now. And I think it's cool because our audience sees sort of what we tend to cover, and then they can say, oh, well, they typically don't cover this kind of thing, so check this out as well. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, if they want, or however they want to, you know, go about voting, you know, maybe they just think like, yeah, they're probably going to get to this one day, but I want them to do it now.
Exactly, yeah.
Anyway, so I was talking about the three characters and how they're all self-aware, and it just reminded me, I wanted to touch on Celeste a little bit. Celeste is like the rich one who's got the abusive husband, and I like how self-aware she is about her wealth and like the weird status that gives her. She
has to catch herself sometimes, though. Every once in a while, she'll say something that she realizes, like, oh, I just came off as. Now she is self-aware about it because she's introspective.
That's what I'm saying. Like, she realizes, she's like, oh shit, now I realize that I'm saying this. I can tell that, like, there was a line where she's like, every room in our house is designed to tell you that we're wealthier than you are.
Yeah.
Or something like that. It was like this.
Well, and her husband, every time they go to a charity auction, they give the money. They give an insane, like, you know, tens of thousands of dollars, and it's not even about the charity of it. It's about the status and that kind of thing. So she's not the type of self-aware character that, like, doesn't make these kinds of comments because she's that self-aware, but she's self-aware enough to sort of be introspective and say, like, oh, you know, I'm coming from a place of privilege.
Like, she still is that person, and she is privileged, and she knows that, but then, yeah, she also is, like, aware of that, and which makes me like her when I would think otherwise I would probably not like her as much. It makes me like that she realizes, like, oh, I can't just, like, offer to pay someone's bill. Like, that would be insulting. Like, that kind of stuff. Like, she's self-aware enough to know that. And then, like, it's interesting, of course, to see the darkness to her life and how she says, like you can tell she feels guilty about it because she's like, everything about my life is what everybody wants. And so, like, how dare I be upset about, you know, this abuse that's going on? But we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. I'll when we get into the plot, we can talk about that. But and then we have Jane, and we have, like, she is, like, the single mom who is dealing with a lot. She's maybe the least self-aware, actually, of the three, but she's very interesting, and
I think she's also just young, though. I think she maybe doesn't have the experience to back up, like, being self-aware.
That's true. And then she also, like, she's kind of the audience insert in a way because she's the new one to this world. So we identify with her a lot as we're, like, learning about what the situation's like at the school and what these people are like. And she's being guided by Madeline, who's kind of a mentor-like figure. Yeah, she's this single mom, but she has a lot of mysteries swirling around her. And so, you know, I immediately was taken with these three. And I think, like, when I was reading this, I could tell why this is popular. I could tell why this took off, why it made for a good show. It's good stuff.
It's the type of story where I feel like some people feel very seen in a way that they don't maybe some of the time. You're getting a pretty large swath of different people in different economic groups and the way and the struggles and the things that they're going through in a way that, like, some people can see themselves. So, for example, you see, like, Madeline has gone through a divorce. She has a child from a previous marriage. She looks to somebody like Celeste and says, like, oh, she does have it all. She's beautiful. She's got money, all this stuff. And I think people can relate to that. Or there are also people out there that maybe are well off and are seen that way, seen well off and maybe beautiful. They're good looking people. And they don't feel seen because often they don't, like, the stuff behind closed doors for them also isn't being addressed. So I think this is that kind of story, especially for women, that is having this conversation. And it's unflinching, right? Like, there's both sexual and physical violence. It's kind of giving you that realistic look. And I think people relate to that in ways.
I think you're touching on, there's like I would say this is, like, mostly middle class and upper middle class. Well, up to rich, I guess, for Celeste. She's truly wealthy. But most of the people in this group are in that, like, that area. Like, I don't think we have a lot of, like, poorer people in this group.
I would say Jane is maybe the least well off, but she's young and a single parent. But I also would note too, we don't get a ton. Clearly, it's addressed in the book how it's mostly white people as well. It's just like pretty well off white people.
Right. And so I do think this is a area of society where most of the time when you read about them, you'll read about them in a way that is making fun of them. And because they have all this privilege, right? And I think that's totally fair. And what I like about this book is that Liane does make fun of them. And there are characters who are totally laughable. Like Bonnie can be the mother who keeps accusing Ziggy is like pretty reprehensible. So there's a lot of that.
And they're just showing the sides to people. Like maybe there's something ridiculous that this character does that is seen as funny because they're not aware or whatever, but they also have other things going on in their lives that is more serious. So it's like this layered look at you can laugh at somebody for their privilege and then also know there's other things going on. And when I say laugh, I just mean like it's especially for the people who aren't very aware of it, that are walking around thinking that everyone lives this way. Just the way that they can say things that cut deep for people that don't have that kind of privilege, and the ways that they can simultaneously be funny and then also kind of tragic.
That's exactly what I was going to get to, is that it does show the other side of that. It shows them as well-rounded characters with problems, and it treats those problems seriously. You know, motherhood and like all these things that are like very legit concerns that I think are fairly universal. And so you create a story that is open to a lot of people, but I think is going to be particularly appealing to suburban wives. I think are going to eat this up, and I guess that's why it's marketed in this way. And I can see why. But yeah, and then I hopefully that like a show that is going to reach a broader audience like this. I think this book deserves that too. So I hope that that's been the case of it. And it seems like that is the case because from what I've read, this is a big time book.
There was something true crime related that was talked about in the story, and between that and maybe some of the ways that they approach the storytelling, it's catered towards. Oh, I know what it was. Is there's the thing about Jane reading a book in the book club and how like she had gotten out of the habit of reading, and I just thought about how this book appealed in the same kind of way to someone like Jane who maybe is out of practice with reading and is coming to
wink. I haven't read a book in a long time, and like maybe you the reader are the same person doing this.
Right,
yeah, totally.
So I thought that was a pretty clever way of navigating that, and I think that that's the target demo. I think that part of it, I think that word of mouth and just goodwill and well written story sent this book really to the moon.
Yeah, and I think you're right on with the true crime stuff though too, because like a lot of suburban, wives love true crime. And so I think like making a murder mystery set in this world is going to be appealing, and they touch on that. I do think in there was a story about I think it was Madeline, maybe it was Jane, had like left a newspaper out that had a story about a kid getting abducted from their window, which I actually think is a story I've heard about because I do also follow some true crime stuff, and how like their kid saw it and then she was like trying to say, oh no, it was all made up. I think it was Madeline actually, yeah, because then she was like comparing to how like Bonnie would probably like talk to her about it or something.
There's also the thing with Abigail reading about like human trafficking and sexual assault and child trafficking and stuff like that, and like
she has some plan of like something she's gonna do, and we don't like. As far as we are in the book, I don't know what it is. So I'm curious to see what her plans end up being. She even says something like, oh, I wish I would have said something different. So it seems like it's going to be important. Which, like, I'm not going to try and read your face too much.
Just know that I'm walking you down every dark alley of confusion. I'm not going to give you any hints here.
Okay, good. All right. So, I mean, I think it's safe to say we're both having a good time with it. Do we want to get into Liane Moriarty as an author?
Yeah, I'd like to hear what else she's done.
Okay, so she was born in 1966. She's an Australian author. She's written 9 novels, including Big Little Lies and 9 Perfect Strangers, which are both adapted into television series for HBO and Hulu. So have you heard about 9 Perfect Strangers?
I think I have, but it's not something that was on my radar to watch.
I think it's 2021 Hulu thing. Yeah, I don't know much about it, but it does sound familiar. So maybe I've seen a trailer here somewhere. Anyway, Liane's website actually gave me some interesting insight into her as a young author. She says that she can't remember the first story she ever wrote, but she does remember her first publishing deal. Her father commissioned her to write a novel for him and offered an advance of $1. She had no agent at the time, so she accepted her first offer and wrote a 3-volume epic called The Mystery of Dead Man's Island. So I thought that was pretty fun. She got commissioned to write a novel. And so she actually went on and like got into marketing and business and, like she was a little bit more career focused, but then her sister ended up publishing a book. Her sister is Liane Moriarty, who apparently is also fairly well known as a YA author, if I remember correctly from what I read. So she had her book come out, and then Liane got kind of jealous and was like, shit, I better get on it. She'd always wanted to be an author. So that made her write this children's book that she said got turned down by every publisher in Australia. So she then went on to get a master's degree in writing, and as part of that degree, she actually wrote her first novel, 3 Wishes, which is interesting because like I actually wrote a novel for my master's degree too. So it's cool to hear someone who's done that had like the success with it. And so she wrote this book, 3 Wishes, which went on to be published around the world. And then she just kind of added to it, just kept releasing novels. And they kind of grew and grew in popularity. And then her 5th novel in 2013 was called The Husband's Secret. And it was released in the U.S. and within 2 weeks climbed the charts to be a #1 New York Times bestseller, which is always a huge accomplishment whenever an author hits that. And then it remained on the bestseller list for over a year. And then her next novel was Big Little Lies. It debuted at #1, which made her the first Australian author to debut at the top spot in the U.S.
Wow. So that wasn't considered her debut novel though, or?
No. It debuted so when the novel came out, it was already #1, like the first week.
I see.
It didn't climb the charts. It came out at #1.
That's wild.
Which means it had a huge release. So I think that's partly, whenever you see that, it's a little bit of lagging popularity. So like her previous book was so popular that everybody's really excited for Big Little Lies, and then Big Little Lies come out and everybody buys it. So, and then it seems like it delivered. So that's always your best case scenario, right? Where that book then is really good too, it seems like. So yeah, she's just gone on to be super popular. I think she has a 3rd sister who's also an author. She's one of 6. And they might all be sisters. I'm not sure if there's any boys in there or not. But 3 are authors and 3 aren't.
That's pretty cool.
She's the eldest, by the way, of all of them.
I like to see the idea of like three sisters, possibly more, sort of being not competitive, but keeping each other motivated in terms of like pursuing their art and stuff like that. I think that's really fun.
Yeah. Her other sister, who's an author, I believe, is Nicole Moriarty. So yeah, I mean, they're killing it, this family. So one other thing I saw about that specifically for this book, she said her main inspiration came when she heard a radio interview in which a woman recounted her parents' abusive relationship. The woman narrated how, even as an adult, she hid under her bed to escape her parents fighting, an experience Moriarty ended up using in a scene in the book, which we haven't got to yet, so a little bit of a spoiler. Initially, the book was... Oh, this is also an interesting note. Initially, the book was a first-person narrative from each of the 3 main characters, but she soon decided against it and instead interjected the minor character statements between portions of the story. So if you could imagine a version of the story where it's actually first person,
yeah, that's wild.
From all 3 different point of views.
That can be confusing.
See how that could have been kind of confusing. I mean, you could telegraph it. You could put the name of the character at the start or something so that you could follow it. But I do think it would be kind of confusing and disorienting. So I think ultimately this is probably the better version of the story. Yeah. But it's one of those things. I could see why someone might be drawn to that. And I know that it has been done. So I can see why you might be drawn to that idea.
Brings you really close to the events. I am really
curious. And it
does
feel very close. Like, it feels like she's got that narrative distance down, like reduced down to as short as it can be, which is I like.
Right. And I'm really curious hearing that she was opting possibly for first person and also just the story itself. How much of this is she pulling from her life or, some version of her life or experiences? Because I feel like there's an inevitability that you might add some of yourself into the story, but just curious, how much.
I didn't see anything about that. I didn't see anything about her talking about this being like her exorcising demons in any way. It seems like she heard about this, like somebody talking about it on a radio interview. But that may be true. She just hasn't revealed anything like that.
And I'm not even talking about some of the darker elements. I'm just curious about like, having a child in kindergarten and of the families and having to navigate that.
She does have 2 children, I think I read. So that's very possible that, I think likely that she's drawing from personal experience for this world and this kind of stuff, right?
Right. Yeah. I wonder if she's popular at the PTA meetings once this came out. The other parents were like, "This is how you feel about us, huh?" It's always the funny thing that, obviously that's not the case, and she's, embellishing for a novel and using her imagination. But it's funny when people think like, oh, the author, people were probably feeling like they were inserted into the novel in some cases.
It is funny to think about someone like her just like going to a PTA meeting, but I know it happens.
Sure.
Right. Or like you could have your high school math teacher could be Paul Tremblay, or, because I know he still teaches high school math, and like, it's just wild to think about authors out there doing stuff like that. Because to me, they're like stars, right? But I know that in the world of like famous people, authors are pretty low on the totem pole as far as stars go.
But even so, if you're a reader and like, if somebody like that walks in and you're like just doing your job as a teacher or something, and you're like just starstruck you're like, oh my God, I can't give preferential treatment to your child, but holy shit, I'm such a big fan.
Can you imagine if you were going to a high school and you heard that like one of the math teachers is like a best-selling horror author?
I would read all of it, right? I'd read everything he wrote.
Well, you'd also like, I wonder if he's got like a waiting list to get into his class or something. Like
exactly,
everybody, but must be wanting to get in there. But then like, I don't know. Or maybe like none of his kids know, or like barely even know. I don't know. Anyway, are you ready to jump into the first part of summary I have here?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So Jane, a single mother, is on her way to Pirawee Public School in Sydney's northern beaches, where her son Ziggy is starting kindergarten. On the way, she meets Madeline, another mother with a daughter of the same age. Madeline's friend Celeste is also sending her twin sons, Max and Josh, to school. The two strike up a friendship with Jane. All 3 of them have their own problems. Madeline is resentful that her daughter from her previous marriage is growing close to her ex-husband's new wife, Bonnie. Celeste is physically abused by her rich banker husband, Perry. And Jane was raped and left to raise her son Ziggy on her own. To make matters worse for her, Ziggy is accused of bullying Amabella, his future classmate, during orientation. Okay, so yeah, let's talk about the introduction to these characters.
Sure. One thing I want to note too, as we get into this, is I mostly listen to the audiobook so far for this. It's very cool because it's an Australian story read by an Australian voice narrator or actor.
Narrow. I don't know how they say no. Narrow.
Narrow with a W.
Narrow. I'm not making fun of it. It just sounds funny to my American ear. I'm sure we say a bunch of shit that sounds really funny to you too, if you're Australian.
It's hard to not want to try the accents. I've always had an ear. Not that I'm good at it. I've just always been fascinated by that kind of stuff. So
yeah, it's interesting because most of the time, like you can't really tell, and then like something like that hits you, and you're like, "That's very Australian."
Yeah. Anyway, I just thought it really immersed me in the story in a way because my narration wouldn't have been Australian,
right?
So I thought it gave it a fun little tilt to it, and yeah, I just liked sort of thinking about this space. I just assume that a lot of Australia is beautiful, and I'm thinking about this like coastal town where they're at.
I think it is, yeah.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And so
I'd love
getting
to go
into
there.
Exactly. Yeah, let's bring all that old bit back. The character. So Jane, like you said, Jane's kind of the main character in my opinion. Like
she's kind of like what you because you're new to the world as the reader, right? So you kind of identify with her first, I think.
My experience comes from seeing the show first, so I like imagine these characters as the actors who played them.
Yeah, that's going to be a very interesting read than what I have, because like I don't even know for sure who plays who. I'm gonna do a guess here at some point.
Sure. I think that they do a good job of making Jane extremely sympathetic early on, and you I don't know, man. This story gives me anxiety to be a parent someday. Like the idea of like, what if my kid's not as good? What if I can't make them good? What if I,
right?
It's terrifying to think that you're going to raise...
They're a separate person, and they're at that age where, like, I mean, I'm not a parent, so full grain of salt, but it seems like they're at an age where, like, I was once a child, I can say that at least.
Sure.
They're at an age where they're starting to become, like, a separate person. Now, obviously, they're still, like, a 5-year-old child, but I mean, like, I guess it's like they're no longer just, like, a thing you're carrying around. It's like, oh, this is a person. And they're starting to get to that point, and they're like going to school and maybe misbehaving in a way that you don't predict to happen. And it creates this really interesting element with like, what's going on with Ziggy? Is he the one who's actually bullying or not?
And is a child a reflection of how you raise them, or is it like a nature nurture situation? Like, can you raise a child perfectly and make them good, or is it a scenario where there's something baked into them that I think that's kind of what the story is asking as well with Ziggy, is like, do we think he did anything or not?
Right.
Do we believe him when he says that he didn't, choke this other girl?
Yeah.
And I again, terrifying stuff, because you'd think you would want to imbue a lot of yourself into a child, but you can't control that kind of thing.
I don't know about you, man, but I get angry too.
Yeah.
Because like when he's being accused and he's like, I didn't do it, and you're like, well, don't be accusing my kid of something. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just one person's word versus another, one kid's word versus another. So why does your kid's word override mine? I would be pissed off too, man. At what's her name? I can't remember the name of the mom, but she goes hard on Ziggy.
Yeah. So on the character list, her name is Renata. Sorry
Okay.
for not remembering that.
Yeah, no problem. There's a lot of names. All right, so Renata, and in my defense, I haven't seen anybody portray them yet, too, so it's kind of harder to remember all the time. But Renata is the one who's like going in hard on Ziggy, and I was getting angry on Jane and Ziggy's behalf.
Yeah, and this is what I was talking about, where like you see like a certain. I mean, of course, there's like the wealth and the like. Some people are looking down on others for not working and for working, and they're thinking like, are you a bad mom if you're working, or are you a good mom if you're not, and or are you just like enjoying being at home, and all these things that society.
Yeah, one of the snarky comments at the end of a chapter definitely underlined that.
A lot of these things that society tries to put on women because of the typical role, stereotypical gender roles, are that like a woman stays home, and then there's like a lot that obviously we feel that a woman could do. Woman can do whatever she wants. This story is kind of tackling some of that, and especially some of the tension that comes with it. So we see Renata, who works, looking at Madeline differently in different ways, and then looking at Jane in different ways, and just the way that like especially this school like is a lot of people who are well off, who have time to think about all these things that are going on with their kids, and they have time to put aside to do everything with them. So they're very much wrapped up in that, and that brings a lot of tension, and like reputation is a big thing here too. Like, Renata, I think, like wants to make this a scene, one, so that it doesn't happen again, and then two, she just feels that it's not acceptable for this kind of school. And
well, and that's the thing. I mean, it pisses me off so much. She's like, yeah, I'm gonna label this little 5-year-old a bully, and then like from now on treat him differently and treat him like he's a villain.
Sure.
So maddening. And
other side of the coin is, what if you were a mother who had your daughter choked? What if that actually did happen?
Yeah, true. I mean, and you can kind of get it. And like, I mean, I would hope that I would handle it better than her, but
sure. Yeah.
But so what I do like is that I think Liane Moriarty is doing this all on purpose, right? Like she's showing how there's a lot of real anger, and she's evoking it in the reader a little bit, I think, so that we can see how this is actually kind of a powder keg that's going to explode. And then we see, I think like the first chapter, we see some of this spilling out. There's like a brawl taking place. And so it's kind of like a flash forward, flash back kind of deal.
So one of the cool parts is that like a lot of the chapter breaks will say like, 2 weeks till the trivia night or something like that. So it's all building to this trivia night that in the first chapter we heard kind of excerpts from.
Yeah. So apparently there's some sort of big fight. Somebody gets killed by somebody, and I don't know who. I also, one of the things I also really liked about this first half is the slow way that we get introduced to the husbands. Each of them, like, you got like Perry, who's like kind of a piece of shit. This rich guy who's also abusive. But it's a really interesting look at an abusive relationship, and how even Celeste says, like, nobody else knows it but me. And she's like so aware of the fact that she sounds like an abused woman, but then she's like, I don't know, it's weird. It's like she's self-aware and isn't at the same time. I don't know how to explain it. Like she knows that she's saying stuff that sounds like an abused woman, but then she's also like, but they don't understand. They don't understand how my situation's different. This therapist doesn't understand.
Yeah, it's almost like Stockholm Syndrome when you're there, and like when you're in it, you're thinking about all this like time invested with this person, and how you maybe still do love them and wish they didn't do this, but then the kids complicate things, and you want to stay together for them.
Yeah. Well, it really shines a light on like why people stay, which is like the thing that I think a lot of people on the outside who've never been in that situation.
It's easy to say like, why doesn't she just leave? And it's like, it's never that easy.
Yeah. And she really like lays out all the reasons why. It's like, that's not what the relationship is 99% of the time. It's that 1% of the time where it gets like that. And then like all the other times she sees like all the like kindness in him and like the way he is with the kids and all that stuff. And none of that excuses what happens, of course. But you could see how in a person's mind, like,
we as the readers want her to get out of there and like want her to come to the realization, and you know, we're proud
and then
of
like
her
she fights back and she starts to like take on guilt about fighting back and like saying like, well, because I fought back, then I'm like equally as violent and complicit, and like, no, that's not true. And like, yeah, she has to make this plan to leave too, which is another thing. I think it's like you can't just walk out the door. I mean, you could, I guess, but like a lot of times it's like it's better to have some sort of plan in place so you know where you're going to go and what you're going to do and how you're going to be able to afford anything.
And evidence is a whole other thing that she eventually goes to see someone for this. And
she goes to see this therapist, yeah.
They recommend
Counselor.
getting evidence, compiling evidence, and she feels like that's like she can't see herself doing it.
And it's so interesting because like all of this is going on and none of her friends know about it. It's the secret, right? And so we're getting these secrets in these people's lives that is like, that's just really interesting to read about. And then, then you get Jane who, she's got this really dark backstory that we get into. In fact, let me read the second paragraph of summary here. I only have 2 paragraphs, and the second one gets into a lot of the stuff that we're already starting to touch on. So as months pass, the 3 become close, and Jane shares her experience with the other women. Jane tells the 2 other women that Ziggy is the result of a rape by a man named Saxon Banks when Jane was 19. Meanwhile, Celeste's marriage becomes even more violent, and she starts meeting with a counselor and rents an apartment for herself and her sons without Perry's knowledge. Ziggy is once again accused of bullying Amabella and again denies it. Okay, and that leads us to about where we are when we stopped reading. I want to talk a little bit about... well, of course, we got to talk about Jane and what happened to her. But let me talk a little bit first about Madeline, because their relationship becomes very important. Madeline, at first, when she was first introduced, I didn't think I was gonna like her. I was like, I don't like these kind of people, you know. Like she gets out of her car to go like yell at some teenager for being on her phone, and I was like, oh man, you know, she's the like stereotypical Karen kind of moment, and you're like. She's so over the top.
But you can kind of get it, too, because, like, texting on your phone and, like, she has young children and it's, this whole...
You always get, like, I don't know. To me, it's like I always get it. It's just, like, over the top, right? And it's, like, and it's getting in other people's business and it's like, come on.
She's, like, being very motherly about it. Like, she wants these kids to get off their phones because she's a mother.
Yeah. Anyway, she then turns her ankle and that leads to the whole friendship developing because Jane comes to help her. And then she... grew on me like throughout the course of this first half of the book. She grew on me to where she became maybe my favorite character.
Yeah, she's a great character.
She's very funny, and I like how real she is. And I mean, she's a mother of 4, which like my mother was a mother of 4, so maybe there's a little bit of element with that going on. And just the chaos at her house whenever she's like having a conversation. I love the way it's written because like she's talking with somebody and they're having a heart-to-heart or some sort of serious conversation, and there's just people screaming in the background. There's somebody screaming about something's missing or like I can't find something, and like there's just always noise and like something crazy going on. Her relationship with her husband is really interesting. Like I actually really like their relationship, the way they like lay down at bed at night and talk to each other. I thought that was really kind of intimate and cool. And he seems to have some like real anger about, or like real protectiveness over his kids and other kids. And he seems quite upset actually when he learns about Jane. And I also kind of love the way she just like tells him about the stuff that Jane told her, because like when you're a married couple this far along, like I feel like there aren't any secrets anymore, or there are very few. So
and you're going to keep each other's secrets.
And like if you've heard a secret from somebody else, you're like, yeah, I'm just going to tell my husband because he'll keep it. Like, yeah, exactly. You trust them to not tell it, which, you know, maybe isn't always true, but
in a healthy relationship, I think like mutual parties know that.
And they seem to have the healthiest relationship, I think, of all the couples, in my opinion, so far that we've seen. Now, maybe something will come up that will prove that wrong, but like her new husband, I think, is her healthiest relationship.
An element to Madeline that you haven't mentioned yet, I'm sure you're going to get to it though, is that like she again has had a previous marriage and then also has another kid, has a daughter that she's struggling with holding on to because she has this new family and she wants to concentrate on her children, and of course she loves both children or all of her children just as much, but this child is leaning towards the like sort of Zen, doing yoga, no TV, like environment that Bonnie and Nathan, her ex-husband, provide, and she thinks a lot about how Nathan's a completely different person. And she's like, where was this guy when I needed him?
Yeah, he was gone for 10 years, didn't provide any child support.
Well, and also it was just a totally different person. Like, he acts like Bonnie now, whereas before he was
he's like reborn, and now that he's with her.
Yeah, so she just feels it's not fair that she's had a kid with this person and he wasn't, stable at the time and all that kind of thing.
So good. Like, this is the kind of stuff where I'm reading it, I'm like, this is not something you would get from a male author, or I think would be very unlikely to get. This feels like a genuine, interesting concern that a mother would have. And I love just the way she's like, we're trying to be a good person. Like, she's doing these little things, and then Bonnie's like, just goes so hard. Like, they're spending Christmas at a homeless shelter, and they're like, they're doing all this stuff that is just so far that she's like, how can I compete with this?
Especially while raising a child in the environment that she is in.
Trying to raise 4 kids, and like it's like it's maddening, and I could see how this would be maddening. This burgeoning relationship happens between the two of them, where she's like kind of mentoring Jane. Madeline, and I think she feels sorry for her being a single mom and all that. And that's also just kind of how she is. That gets her to open up about this rape that happened to her. Definitely the most harrowing part. I mean, reading about the abuse with Celeste is definitely harrowing too, but this is the most harrowing part. Incredibly dark, brutal, gross to read. And I do like the way it's handled. It is always controversial to write about rape in a book. And it always will be. And I think that there's a place for it. And I think that authors, I don't think that we're in a situation where authors shouldn't write about this kind of stuff. I think they should, but they need to be very careful, and they need to make sure they're doing it in a way that not only serves the narrative, but is conscientious about the people reading it. And the reason I like the way it's done here is that, now I haven't seen how the rest of the book plays out, but so far the way I like it is I like that it's really focused on Jane and how we see her, how this has been haunting her, has like really affected her personality. We see the effects of it, right? Like, more than anything, and how it's changed her as a person fundamentally. She like, doesn't wear makeup, and she like has internalized all of these body issues from it.
She's traumatized. And it's almost said that she's traumatized more so from the things he was saying than what happened too, which is she was like disassociating almost throughout the scene.
Yeah, she was insulting her and all this stuff. Yeah,
it's horrific stuff. Yeah,
her PTSD is totally on display. And then I loved the moment where she says she's realizing that she's feeling a little bit better, and it kind of, she's like, I don't even know why, and then she thinks like it's almost like talking about it took away some of its power. And like, I really love that moment where she realizes like just telling one person about it has been kind of a weight off her shoulders, and she finally can start to let it go a little bit and start to move on a little bit. And I just thought that was like a good message, and like I like the way that works. Now, of course, we'll see where it goes from there, but
yeah. And I mean, it's very bold to write a story with a mother who is kind of like, she clearly loves her son entirely and is just grappling with the fact the father raped her.
Yeah. That introduces that biology versus, nature versus nurture. Like, she's worried about what might lurk within, and the fact that it's a choking specifically accusation, as you could tell why that's really triggering to her. Now, we don't know for sure. I don't think Ziggy actually choked the child. I think there's too many unknowns here. I feel like maybe another child did it, and for whatever reason, the girl didn't want to say. Maybe it was another girl and she was embarrassed about that, or maybe it was someone who is popular or something for some reason and she can't say it. But for whatever reason, I think she felt like she couldn't say it. I don't think it was an adult. Could be. There's a lot of mysteries still there, but
yeah, I just wanted to touch in on like with writing a character that's dealing with that like idea of still she loves this child. Like, there's nothing that's going to take that away. And then seeing that through all of the stuff that she's been through, the way that she feels about the child, I think is like, it's really uplifting in a way, because it's such you can see another version of the character kind of not being able to separate her child from what happened to her.
Well, and I think that the narrative shows us that, because we see her struggling with it. We see her looking at her boy and saying like, what was that moment he gave me? What was that look he gave me where he seemed like really like dark or like serious or like something? Like she's like looking for little things that are like hints at, you know, his father, and like you could totally see why that would be the case. And I like that like that does show how like difficult a decision this actually would be and is for people, and how you can't guarantee that you would be able to love a child that came from a situation like this. Like, it's hard for us to even talk about it because, you know, we're two dudes, so we're just like a very specific side of this equation.
And this is also a huge reason why we believe in a woman's right to choose too, right? Like there's, you know, this happens, and if completely up to whatever the woman feels she wants to go forward with.
Absolutely. And I think that this book is striking a tone where it can talk about a woman who chose to raise her child and love her child and celebrate that, but not at the same time make it seem like it was the only right decision to make.
Right.
So, and that's a tightrope, right? So, you know, I didn't even like realize it till we're talking about it, like how much I'm like, wow, it's actually kind of amazing that she was able to nail that so well.
Yeah. I do. We kind of went pretty quick by Madeline. I just wanted to give my thoughts on her too. I love this character because everyone wants to be a friend like this. I think you should strive to be a friend like Madeline, because like you see how she's so understanding, and then she's also like there for this person who's you know, clearly you're a single mother, like the, you know, it takes a village, that whole thing that everybody talks about, like having support and like just I think about like,
and she's got the experience, like she knows what to do.
Yeah. And I just think about like people who help my parents, and like seeing my parents help younger parents, and the way that plays out. And
that's a good point.
I just love seeing that out of Madeline. And like, you know, like if there's anybody that's a good character here, it's like Madeline's in the right.
Shout out to Barb and Mary Jo, who were my mom's two closest friends growing up and who helped raise us for sure. And, you know, not like super hands-on, but there were times, you know, where they would help each other. And they were mothers all at the same time, and there was a lot of this kind of situation going on, and you know, these kind of relationships. Totally.
Yeah, things happen, and it's just good to have people to lean on, and I think that's like really cool to see. Well, I think some of these other characters are friendly with Jane, to see like that's that true friendship that you can count on. Yeah. It's awesome to see.
Yeah, so I guess let's circle around to some of the mysteries, maybe. I mean, we've talked about Celeste, I feel like, sufficiently. She's kind of right now, like, feels the most disconnected from the other two. And I think that's because she has not revealed what's going on with her yet to them. And I'm hopeful at some point, and I assume we will at some point get that, where we'll see them and then she'll be able to lean on her friends a little bit in a way that she hasn't so far.
Yeah, I just want to say proud of her for going to seek, because, you know, originally she's looking up like, you know, marriage counseling, and then backspaces all of that and addresses what it really is and types in the search engine, like domestic violence or domestic abuse or something like that. So for her to get to that stage and start to take some of the power dynamic back. And I'm just happy to see that when she's in those meetings, the person, she's like in her mind, like, why am I going to this really young person? And, oh, that's probably something she learned in school. And she's kind of like downplaying this professional, but she's realizing she's getting like really good information. And like, you know, again, she tells her to take evidence of bruising and any kind of violence and things that he does. So it's just, it's wild to see her simultaneously getting good information and also being still so resistant to it because of her situation. And then she brings up, have you ever feared for your life? And she's like, no. And then she's like, oh, actually this one time. And you're like, fuck, man, this is.
Yeah. No, except for that one time where he like almost
really
killed me.
Dark.
Yeah. And the other thing I want to say about her character that I really like the way it's unfolded is she's also not that likable early on. She's this rich, beautiful woman who seems kind of aloof, disconnected, and then the first time we get her point of view, even, she seems to have this perfect life, and she has these perfect kids and this perfect house, and, you know, a husband who seems great. And then I think like towards the end of that first chapter where she says, and you know, this will be great until the kids you know, graduate, and then I'm going to leave him. And she just kind of leaves us with that, and we're like, wait, why? Like, you know, because you have no idea. She hasn't revealed at this point what's going on, and so you're left to wonder, like, is she just like bored of this life and she's like looking for something else? And so you start filling in all these possible reasons that she could be there. And I had the benefit of the doubt for her of like, maybe something really is going on we don't know about, and that ended up being the case. But like, your mind doesn't know. You're like, she could be, maybe she's just a shallow person who's ready to move on, and like, you just don't know. And I love that again, she grows on me over time because we start to see what's actually going on with her, and we start to see her actual strength, even if at first she doesn't seem to be a very strong character.
There's really there's two other characters that I think we should highlight as borderline main characters as well. And that's Renata, who we've talked about a little bit, but I want to dig more into Renata, and then Bonnie. Let's start with Bonnie. Do you think that Bonnie's to blame as much as Madeline feels that she is? Do you think that she's doing these things out of the goodness of her heart, or is she actually trying to, is she doing it for status and that sort of thing?
There are people like this you will meet. There are people like this in Portland for sure. And they're almost like too good. And like, it's not their fault, I don't think, to me, especially if it's genuine. And to me, as far as I know, it is genuine is from what I've seen. But what they're not good about, and the thing that I do think you can kind of judge them for, is they're not good about realizing that not everyone can be like them, and not everyone has the means to be able to do the things they do. And they can be kind of holier than thou and kind of snobby about it. And that's where it can get into kind of shitty territory. They're still not villains to me, but you can see why Madeline doesn't have the greatest feelings about her and is a little bit frustrated with her. And
we're pretty close with Madeline too, so you don't feel like she's actively trying to take her daughter away. And then there was the whole race where they were racing, and it was like Bonnie versus Madeline, and ultimately there was the controversy who actually won. Mm-hmm. When I think it's pretty much stated in the text that Madeline won, but other people were saying Bonnie, and then Madeline gives the ribbon, I think, as like a metaphor of like, you won, you took my daughter from me, you can have this too, kind of thing.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I don't know enough about Bonnie. I think like if we got some more of her like point of view or something, maybe I'd have more of an opinion. And I assume in the show we'll probably see a little bit more of her to where I might form more of an opinion. But right now I think the verdict's still out on her. The other one, Renata. That's the mother of the kid who's like getting attacked and stuff.
Right.
So far, I'm just mad at her. I do recognize that she is reacting to a very shitty situation, but the way she like storms into the principal's office and is like, "Oh, good, you're here. We're gonna fucking do this right now," and she just starts like going in on Jane. That's the kind of stuff that I'm just like, all right, let's all settle down. Like you're going way too hard, and you're leaping to conclusions when you don't know for sure. That's the thing. Like you just don't know, and you're assuming things that is just like, it's so maddening to me. And that's the shit that's getting me mad on Jane's behalf. And then again, we're just like building that powder keg. And I feel like it's whatever happens later, I think it's all related to this stuff with Ziggy. That's my guess. Is it's all related to this bullying stuff with Ziggy. We got the quote about bullying at the start of the book. Seems like this is going to be the heart of it. But I would love to do some theory crafting. It's going to be difficult with you because you know the answers to a lot of this stuff.
Well, I'm going to abstain. I have to. Yeah, I can't. Yeah.
But maybe you could just kind of like let me soundboard off you a little bit. I can tell you where I'm at with some thoughts. Also, I want to try and guess at who our three main leads are. Should I do that first?
Yeah, let's guess the casting.
All right, so I think Nicole Kidman is absolutely Celeste.
Okay.
Do you want to tell me if I'm right or not?
I was going to say, do you want me to react or tell you?
Well, let me name all three first.
Okay.
So I think absolutely Nicole Kidman is Celeste. She's like perfect for that role. I think Reese Witherspoon is Jane, and then that makes Laura Dern Madeline. That's my guess.
And again, do you want me to say yes or no?
Yeah, tell me if I'm right.
Okay, you're not right.
Really? I was so sure. Okay, who did I mess up?
You messed up Jane, and you messed up
Madeline. Did I get them swapped?
Madeline.
So it's swapped.
It's not swapped. No, it's not swapped. There's a wild card in here that you're not accounting for.
I'm so confused. Is there another actor who's not one of these three who plays one of the three leads?
Yeah, I'll just say one of the three that you named is Renata.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so like Laura Dern is probably Renata then.
Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so Reese Witherspoon is Jane?
No.
Okay, so then that makes her Madeline for sure.
Yes.
So there's another character who plays Jane who I don't know who it is.
Yeah.
That's what's throwing me off. I thought those three were our three. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
They kind of are.
Who plays Jane? You got to tell me.
Shailene Woodley.
Okay. What do I know her from? That name's familiar.
Yeah. So Divergent is the big thing that she's known from.
Okay. Yeah. So that makes sense. And it makes sense that they would cast someone younger because I was thinking that all of them are a little older to be Jane. But I thought maybe they just aged the character up a little bit. Whereas the other mothers are all like have kids who have been through this and they're a little older. Anyway, so I got that pretty wrong. I guess the only one I nailed was Celeste, which I was very sure. was Nicole Kidman.
Yeah, you got that one. Again, I'll just say again, killer cast, and then I'll tell you, Zoë Kravitz plays Bonnie, which I said at the beginning of the recording, but like her as Bonnie is great as well, and yeah, I'll be excited to see how you feel about Fault in Our Stars is the other massive thing.
Oh,
I think
yeah.
Shailene Woodley, that was the first thing she was known from, is Fault in Our Stars.
And Zoe Kravitz was in the new Batman?
Yes, she was Catwoman.
Okay. All right, I know who you're talking about. All right, so anyway, now for theory crafting. Let me just tell you where I'm at. I'm not going to like come down hard, or, like I'm not going to say like this is what's going to happen. I'm just like, this is where I'm at. I think the history of violence in Perry makes him a pretty prime suspect for committing murder. I think this is one of the characters we've been introduced to who's capable of it, I think. Celeste, there was a line at one point, there was a little hint where somebody at the end of a chapter said, "Sad to think of it now, very sad." And it was somebody was referring to something about Celeste. And I thought, why is it sad to think of it now? So that makes me think Celeste might have been the victim. Now, I haven't been good about tracking everybody who's talked at the end of every chapter to like to know who's still around and who's not. But I don't remember Celeste showing up at the end of any of these chapters, and it makes me think that she could be the victim, and then like her husband is the perpetrator. That seems a little too clean and obvious to me, though. Like that seems like almost like where she's expecting us to go. So I'll grant you that. But I'm seeing a bit of that right now. I do think there's the mystery going on with Ziggy, which I already said I don't think he's actually the one choking. So that seems like it's going to be connected. And then the dark horse in this, the sort of wild card, is Madeline's husband. What's his name? Is his name like John or something?
This is one of the dark alleyways that was going to lure you down if you didn't mention this. Like, this is one of those things where it's like stated in the background, kind of like, oh, was he? I think his name is Ed.
Oh,
maybe?
yeah. I think you might be right. Yeah, so he's got this like anger about abusers. It seems like that he's got, and he's got like a righteous anger to him, to where I could almost see him losing control.
He also said he would kill somebody.
Yeah, there's been a few times where somebody said something about killing people. Even Madeline said like, oh, she was picturing herself like smashing Zoe's face in or something, and like Bonnie's face, I should say when I say Zoe. Oh, the actor. Bonnie. So it's definitely open to a lot of people. I guess that's gonna be my guess, is that Ed is gonna take out something on an abuser, but I don't know that he's gonna actually kill the person, because I kind of think Celeste might be the one who dies. I don't know, man. I'm still up in the air. Maybe she just got hurt, and then that would still be sad to see now if she ended up getting hurt but she didn't die. And my hope is that whoever is responsible for abuse is maybe the one who's targeted. But then it's like, if it's related to Ziggy, how does that, unless it is an adult abusing them, which is possible. Maybe there's an adult, and in that case, things can get real fiery real quick.
That's what's crazy about this kind of stuff, right? Is that if you're familiar with mysteries, you know that there's red herrings. So you know that there's going to be paths that you're walking down that are misdirects. But also at the same time, anybody could be possible. Really, anybody is a suspect.
Well, in a good mystery, and I feel like this is, mystery fans will be mad if you didn't play fair. They want you to play fair. So what they want is they want the evidence to be there. They just want it to be amongst a bunch of other evidence to where it's hard to actually discern it. And that way they can kind of play the game like we just did. Like, I think mystery readers want to kind of play along, and they want to try and guess. And if all of a sudden at the end you're like, and it was some other character that we haven't introduced so far and you knew nothing about, haha, that's not like a rewarding reading experience. So I doubt that that's going to be the case. Now, you can introduce that character like at the midpoint or later on. I think that can be done, but yeah, you got to be careful as a mystery author, I think, with that. But on the other hand, mystery readers also want to be surprised, and so you can't be obvious with it. You can't be too obvious.
You can't Scooby-Doo it. You can't be like, oh, that one character that we introduced this time might be the bad guy. Unmask him.
Yeah. Or just obvious. Like, that's why I was saying, like, I don't think it's going to be Perry. So I think that's a little too obvious. That's my guess. But who knows? So that's where I'm at with it, man. I'm having fun. So we're actually I'm not going to get answers to everything, at least, because we're going to watch the show next week. that we're going to start the show. So there will still be a lot of outstanding mysteries, at least for another week.
Right. And so there's 7 episodes in the season. So we're going to watch 4 episodes from the first season.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot to mention this. So there's a second season, and I read that the second season is actually based off of a novella that Liane Moriarty wrote.
So when that season came out, too, I was convinced that they were going off the material. And so it'll be interesting to talk about that, and maybe we cover that in some point as a bonus.
Because I think it isn't completely off. At least it's another novella that she wrote.
Right.
Because I think this was originally marketed as a limited series, right? That wasn't going to have a season 2.
Right. I didn't think there would be another season.
Okay, so that's what we're going to do next week. Hopefully you join us for that. If you enjoyed this episode and this coverage, let us know in the form of a rating and review on whatever app you chose to listen on. Apple Podcasts especially, we're surging towards 100 reviews. We'd love to get there.
And make sure that you connect with us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. If you're on YouTube, make sure to subscribe and like the videos.
And if you wanted to connect with us on Patreon and support us on there, you get access to monthly episodes that we put out that are like adaptation adjacent, other adaptations, stuff like that. Special episodes that we try, little one-offs, experimentation, that kind of stuff is all on there. And then it also gives you the ability to vote on those polls, like the one that got us to cover Big Little Lies. All right, man. All that's left to do is to watch this show. It's been a little while since we covered TV. Definitely, I think, the first of the season for us. So, yeah, I'm excited to watch some TV. This should be fun.
Yeah.
All right. Looking forward to it. Until next time.
Keep adapting.